Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Thursday morning Volquest podcast. I'm Eric Kane, alongside Brent Hubbs, Grant Ramey, and Austin Price. Big thanks, as always, to our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions, local and trusted since 1999. For roofing, siding, garage, windows, you can contact Exterior Home Solutions today. A free estimate by dialing 865-524-5888 online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. They've been local, they've been trusted since 1999. Got a lot of questions here submitted from the GQ for this mailbag question, so we'll jump right into it. We'll start with Iheartvols. Are college athletics headed for a NASCAR-esque market correction where fans finally say enough's enough? It's not monopoly money after all.
No, I don't think so. One, college football doesn't have a 40-week schedule or a 34-week schedule or whatever NASCAR tried to do. Two, college football is rooted in markets that are not gonna become disinterested in college football. I think part of NASCAR's issue is that they got out of those markets. They got out of places where it was the lifeblood of the area, and they went to Chicago and they went to California and Phoenix and some places like that, and got out of some of the smaller tracks in North Carolina where they were rooted in their popularity. I just don't think college football is going to get away from where they're rooted. I mean, I don't think Knoxville, Tennessee is going to get tired of the Vols. Now, from a national scene, we looked at the numbers. That wasn't great in the playoffs. I think if you're college football, you have to look at why that's the case, Grant. Is that a fatigue because of the length of the season? I do think that's one thing that hurt NASCAR, is the season's just too long. So, do you have to look at that from a college football standpoint? Is the last 2 weeks of August till basically the 1st of February too long for college football for fans? I think those are things you have to look at, but I don't think they're in a place where NASCAR was.
And don't change the postseason 47,000 different times in 47 years. I mean, you need to tweak the 12-team playoff, and it's probably going to grow and all that stuff, and you need to fix the seating and stuff like that. But I think once you get through some of those initial changes, it'll be fine. I think NASCAR's problems are a whole lot different than anything college football's facing or going to face based on, and I agree with what Hub said, going from what was not just a regional sport, but somewhat regional to something national to it just felt like they lost the plot with all the changes that they made over the years. I don't see that happen with college football.
Barnes mentioned after the Florida game, I think, that SEC officials are allowing more physical play and that will help teams in the NCAA tournament. Rob, Grant, Brent, your thoughts on this seeming to be a trend this year, and if officials were asked to do this by the league office?
I think Rick has complained more about freedom of movement on the perimeter and guys getting held off of screens and being more physical defenders coming off screens and stuff like that. Tennessee's as guilty as that as anybody with the physical brand of defense they play. I think Rick's complaint or Rick's comment is he wants it called the same in the NCAA tournament as it's called all throughout the regular season. So if you're going to play that way right now in January, then let them play like that in March in the Sweet 16 or the second round or whatever game it is. So I think that's more that's what I've heard him talk about more is the freedom of movement more so than just physicality in general.
RL Vol 0527, do we look to add a linebacker in the spring portal? I know the staff is high on Spillman, and we know what we have in Carter, but Telander really seemed to struggle against the pass, and we played 5 LBs this past fall.
I would say no. I don't think you're adding anybody at linebacker in the spring. Now, could they change their mind after going through spring, Brent? Maybe. But as of right now, we sit here in late January, I would tell you no.
Yeah, they signed a very highly acclaimed group of high school players. And that is a position where they played young guys in critical situations. I mean, you think about it. I mean, Spillman comes back from a hand injury, and he's in the Vanderbilt game when the game was not over. I mean, he played early in that game. They've been willing to play young players there. I think they like the youth that they've got there. I think there's a good bit of investment in making sure you landed that youth. And when you do that, you play young, you go young. So I think Tennessee will be younger at that position, but how they develop this spring and summer, will be pretty interesting to watch and see. And I think that I don't think they'll add anybody.
David Keith fans got a couple of baseball questions. What are the roles of Ethan Payne and Kirby Connell? Are they restricted in any way like some quality control coaches are in football? They're support staff. They're a part of the support staff. Ethan Payne's going to help with the infielders because he kind of played all over the place, and he'll kind of be in that role, helping out Ricky Martinez and coaching the infielders. Kirby Connell is going to be out there with Frank Anderson, Josh Reynolds, and the pitchers help run the bullpen a little bit and kind of get experience there. Both those guys, of course, on the team a season ago, trying to get a start in coaching. Is there a certain time the Vols have to set their roster number? And if so, how much are they allowed to tweak it during the season? I'm kind of thinking of A.J. Russell and his return from injury. Tennessee's got to get in its official active roster for the season, like game day, maybe 24 hours first pitch. I mean, it's right up against the brink. And there will not be an official roster at Tennessee's website until probably game day, right? That's just kind of how they do it. You have an active roster for the season, meaning these are the players that can play in games this year. It's 40 or whatever. Then you have a active roster for the weekend every weekend, and it's 37 or whatever. A lot of those guys on the active roster won't play, and they'll redshirt, and that's normal. If you are not on the active roster for the season, the only way, to my understanding, the only way that you can get on the active roster for the season is if there's some type of season-ending injury. And that's still rare. Like last year when AJ got hurt, of course he came back, but like they didn't bring somebody up from the minors, quote unquote. AJ Russell, even though he won't be ready to begin the season, he'll be on the active roster and he'll be ready to go, whenever he's getting back into the swing of things.
One other thing about that restricting earnings, because he mentioned football, AP, there are no restrictions for analysts in football. I mean, those guys, they can be on the field coaching,
right?
Recruiting. They can do whatever they want to. They've because you can't monitor it and you can't police that. So they've just said, okay, we can't control that. So we're going to let it go. And all those guys are on the field coaching. I don't know if it's exactly that way in baseball, but he used football as an example there. And those guys can do whatever they want to do from a coaching standpoint.
VolumeShooter's got a couple. This has probably been answered somewhere along the way, but when Heupel and staff did their evals on Faizon Brandon, Jared Curtis, what stood out about Brandon over Curtis? Seems like the board spent hundreds of threads debating Knight versus MacIntyre, but we didn't see a ton about the 26 board.
Well, I think because most people looked at it, and at the time Faizon committed, he was ranked number one. Now, he's still number one by some. I still think he should be number one. I don't know why he went to where he is with us. That one's a head scratcher to me, especially when he continues to churn out big plays, state titles, and everything else. But I think it's mostly because of that. I don't think, I think people thought, it'll either be George or, Jared Curtis as far as in-state quarterbacks. Once George committed, I think everybody just kind of assumed Jared Curtis, who previously committed to Georgia before he decommitted, still being recruited by Georgia, was going to go elsewhere. So I don't think it was ever like a real thing because he never really took a bunch of visits here, right? Like he came up here for a camp, performed well at camp, but never was around the campus that much once George pulled the trigger.
Well, also too, I mean, Faizon came off the board so early.
That's right.
I mean, he's what, 6 months ahead of where George was, or better than 6 months ahead.
George committed in February, and he committed in August.
I mean, he was committed before anybody even realized there were other quarterbacks in the class to debate in some way because he came off the board so fast.
And again, Curtis never really came up here. So when you throw all that together, that's why there was not like this big debate. I mean, think about it. Deuce Knight became a debate because he came up here for several camps. Some Jared Curtis did not do. He came from one. And he moved here for a brief minute to play at Lipscomb. So, it became more of a thing than this ever got to be.
I'm convinced Nico will take a huge step, mostly because he's so young and he was in such demand coming out of high school. Let's say he doesn't. Should we start worrying about the staff falling too much in love with guys with the big arms? We already saw a little bit with them rolling with Milton before pivoting to Hooker after Milton's injury.
I don't think so. I mean, I think you're going to play your best guy. And I mean, I think Nico's arm is good, but I think one of the things everybody likes about Nico has been his accuracy, his ability to throw off platform and some different things like that, more so than, he's just got some great cannon back there. I mean, he does have a good arm, don't get me wrong, but it's not, I don't think that's why anybody liked that. That was the deciding factor for him was the big arm, so to speak. So no, I don't have that concern.
Coach Rick Barnes' pivot from half-court, interior-driven offense to a much larger emphasis of playing out of the backcourt and shooting more threes has been well documented, and it's pretty rare for a coach that has been around so long. If you look at the stats, Tennessee's three-point percentage is still pretty low. 150th across D1 pre-Kentucky, and it got even worse during the Kentucky game. Is there hope that we ever become more effective from three? It seems like we go through more cold streaks than other major contenders.
Well, there better be hope. You better hope they start seeing some shots go down at some point, because they're going to shoot a lot of threes, because they're going to be dared to shoot threes. Like Kentucky dared them to shoot threes Tuesday night, and Tennessee took 45 of them. Like, at some point you're going to make them, because you can't really play inside out when you can't dump it down to Felix and expect him to score, when you don't really have much of a threat of a paint score just by getting the ball down in the post. They like lobs and stuff like that to Caden Felix. Well, Kentucky took that away, and they kind of dared them to let Sakai get to the rim and see if he could finish against that kind of length, and then guard shooters on that penetration. And they're going to give them the 3-point line. So Tennessee's going to have to – they've built an offense, or they've built a roster where they have volume shooters and guys that are going to shoot a lot of threes. Well, they better make those threes at some point, or you're hurting, or you're looking like you did against Kentucky Tuesday night.
Whose volume shooters better? Ours at Volquest or Tennessee's?
Clearly ours at Volquest right now.
Brent, I get it. But when you're not hitting the three ball, where do they go for offense? Because, you can stand out there and people are going to let you shoot it all day long. Is it just keep shooting it until you hope one of them goes in? Or I just don't feel like that they are proficient scorers. They're shooters, but they don't have a lot of proficient scores. Where do they find scoring on a night where the ball is not freely going in the basket from the perimeter?
That is a great question. If I had the answer, I think Rick might be trying to hire me away from this podcast right now. Because, I don't know. Like, I don't think mid-range is not a popular answer, as we saw the other day with what we said on the Monday podcast. They're not really great at layups either. Those numbers are pretty average, below average. They're awful from the three-point line right now. So I don't really know where they go. I think it's just something where they got to, at some point, they're going to have to hit some shots, because I don't know what other choices they have. I don't know how they establish paint touches and paint scoring. I don't know how they, I don't think they live and die in the mid-range. I think they're going to keep shooting threes, because they're going to keep getting open looks. It's just a matter of somebody's going to have to start making them. We saw Igor against Kentucky Tuesday night. He hadn't made a shot, it feels like, in forever, and he made a lot of shots. Now, can Chaz do that? Can Gainey do that? Can other guys do that too? And just kind of get past this cold snap, because the schedule's not letting up. Tennessee's going to have to make some shots, or it's going to get sideways quick.
Don't you think, though, Grant, with Igor, like, was this the kind of the fire starter for him, or does he go right back in the tank, right? Like, if he performs like he did on Tuesday night, and then the other guys come along with him, then all of a sudden you're starting to cook with grease, right? Like,
right.
To me, like, was this the outlier, or is this going to become a thing? Because if it becomes a thing, all of a sudden, I think Tennessee can find their footing again. Maybe they didn't Tuesday night, so to speak, but I think if he can consistently give you that, and that's been talked about on the board, him kind of being that X factor for the team.
He's going to rebound. He's going to affect games in other ways, but if he's making shots, he becomes a completely different basketball player. And for me, the crazy thing against Kentucky, like I expect you to miss shots on the road, because it's tough to play on the road. But we've seen Chaz at home have those stretches where he makes 3-4 threes in 4 or 5 minutes really quickly in succession in the first half, and gets going quickly, because it's your home gym. It's where you practice. It's where you're playing half your games. It's where you're comfortable. So to see them not shoot it, or to shoot it so poorly at home, was kind of shocking to me, because Kentucky was daring them to shoot it. You're in your home gym. You got to make those shots. So it was good to see Igor do that. It was, it was wasted. That's unfortunate, but he's going to have to carry that over. Chaz is going to have to get back to doing what he can do. Gainey's going to have to hit shots. Like, it's going to have to happen. You're going to have to see it Saturday against Florida, because they got Florida, they got Missouri. Those are two good basketball teams. You've seen what Florida can do to them if you don't play well. Then they go on the road for 4 of the next 5. Kentucky's in that stretch. Texas A&M's in that stretch. They don't play well at A&M, or they haven't in recent years. So they better figure it out, and they better find a way to score it pretty quickly, because it's going to get tough.
Grant, any concern that this is becoming a tired basketball team? I know it was a quick turnaround. You played Saturday night, Tuesday night. You're playing a lot of minutes with a light bench. Do you have, is there concern about, any dead legs and that, or is that overreacting to a really bad day of shooting basketball in your home gym?
No, I don't think it's overreacting, because you have 9 scholarship players, because you got a a actual rotation that's maybe 7 or 8, because how many minutes is Bishop Oswald going to play every night? D-Stone played a little bit more against Kentucky, had a bigger role there, so maybe he can do something to help you out. But it's one of the concerns. I mean, when Chaz does get open looks, it looks like he's rushed. I think that's one of his problems right now. I think he might be thinking about it too much. It looks like Igor might have been in his head a little bit, thinking about it too much before that Kentucky game when he was struggling. So, but when you're missing shots the way they're missing shots, and some of them are not particularly close, you have to wonder if they're tired, if it's legs, because they don't have a huge rotation. They play a lot of minutes with the guys that they have in the front of their rotation. At some point, it's going to take its toll.
Igor against Kentucky, 19 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, and in honor of Rob Lewis, minus 17, a team worse on the plus minus.
Who led the plus minus? Let's just take a guess. D-Stone plus 20.
D-Stone had 20. Yeah, plus 20. Makes no sense. I think that's the stupidest stat in all basketball, the plus minus.
Hub's favorite stat.
SPittVol, are you taking the over or the under Rick Barnes coaching for 2.5 more years?
I'll go under, because that's a long time. Like that's 3 rosters that you're going to have to overhaul. Feels a long way down the road. As much as stuff has changed over the last 5 years, who knows what the game's going to look like in 3 years? And once Sakai is gone, you've heard him make those comments like, I don't know if I'd still be doing this without Sakai. I don't know how you read into that and all that stuff, but just his age, how long he's been doing it, how the game has changed. I don't know what I'm doing 3 years from now. It's crazy to think about. So I would go under.
Devol 5, at the Power 5 level, how can ADs continue to argue that they don't have the money to pay players with the coaching salaries and staff sizes?
At the Power 5 level, I don't know how many ADs are coming out screaming they're against rev share. I think there's more ADs who would like control of roster money than anything else. Now I think the comedy in all of this has been, basically Nick Saban coming out and talking about how it ought to be controlled and regulated, and it's an unfair platform now because there's this great separation financially between schools. And he and Jimmy Sexton drove that platform on the coaching world. He's the one who got coaching salaries to $10+ million. So ADs are always going to be talking about money. Right? They've been talking about money for 45 years because they needed a new facility here. They needed that. It's always going to be about fundraising with athletic departments. But, I don't know that you're seeing a lot of ADs complain about. I think they're more complaining about the lack of guardrails, AP, or I hate that term, but the lack of regulation on it than there is the fact that they're spending money.
Yeah, I think it's just the rules. I agree. I think the money part of it, maybe bothers them fractionally. I think it's the fact that kids can kind of just come and go as they please. They hold schools hostage. There's all these agents involved that, are constantly, plotting and scheming. It's all that together that, I think drives the athletic directors crazy. It probably drives the coaches crazy too.
Ponyville 14, outside of beating Georgia or winning the big road games, what is the next step for Heupel to take in terms of getting to a national championship? We got a step closer this year making the field, so what do we have to do to take that next step? Brent, I'm going to give it to you, man. Your favorite answer. Go.
Well, I do think you have to win on the road. You got to quit dropping. You got to quit laying an egg too, right? You got a home playoff game if you beat Arkansas.
Yep.
What does that look like? So I do think to be a higher seed, to talk about getting a bye and those types of things, you're going to have to win games on the road in this league. High profile, big games on the road in this league. And they're certainly going to have their opportunities this year when you look at going to Florida, which has been a house of horrors, and Alabama on the schedule. But you also got to avoid that egg. You got to avoid losing that game you're not supposed to lose, which was obviously the Arkansas game last year and what it cost Tennessee.
Was looking for more efficiency in the red zone. Sorry.
That's a given, but those are individual things to win games. He was talking big picture, and big picture is you don't lose at South Carolina in 2022. You don't lose at Arkansas in 2024. If you're going to be a home playoff team, or you're going to have, chance to have a bye, those type of things, you just, who in the playoff got in? And you said, boy, they really laid an egg somewhere along the way and still got in. How many of those teams were there out there this year?
Kane teed Hubs up, looking for a specific answer, and then your response, Eric, was the kind of the "May God have mercy on your soul" thing from Billy Mattis.
Sorry, Eric, I disappointed you.
Better red zone efficiency, better plus minus numbers.
How many articles have we written about red zone efficiency?
Well, they do have to be better in the red zone.
They got it.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. That's about fixing the offense. He asked about winning a national title.
Just do one of the three. I mean, you got to take the step. You got to win on the road or beat Georgia. Period.
Let's rephrase. What do they have to do on the field in specific situations to get
Inside
closer?
the 20.
They've got to have explosive plays, and they've got to have better red zone efficiency.
There we go.
Yeah, and I know, again, like AP said, I know he said outside of beating Georgia or winning the big road games. But, I mean, you want to take another step as a program, win on the road or beat Georgia for sure.
Get off the field on third down in big games.
Volunteer at 87. If you have the money to spend in bidding wars, what's the point in recruiting high school quarterbacks when every year there's a handful of Will Howards or Riley Leonards looking to find a win-now roster? Let's assume Merklinger wins the job in 26. I'd have to imagine that we have a lot of our NIL budget tied up with GMac and Faizon that we could have paid for a Caleb Downs or a Judkins. AP, how would you answer that?
Sure. I understand his logic. I mean, I don't think that they at the end of the day, it's a quarterback-driven game. And so I think for Heupel and them, they want to continue to work the high school ranks. They're going to continue to recruit high-end quarterbacks out of the high school ranks and go that route instead of trying to go and add players out of the transfer portal at quarterback. You could argue both ways. If Jake Merklinger wins the job in 2026, then you'll have a lot of money sitting over there on the sidelines.
Yeah. By the way, Ohio State went and signed a 5-star, all-world, highly ranked, expensive quarterback to follow up Will Howard.
Yeah, they had Julian Saying transfer from Alabama.
Yeah, and then they went and got the St. Clair kid as well.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not like they're sitting there going, okay, we've got the rest of this roster, and every year we're going to go get a transfer quarterback, and that's how we're going to build our team. But yeah, I mean, there are multiple ways of looking at that. I mean, it's the same thing in basketball recruiting, right, Grant? I mean, do you want to spend a bunch of money on a high school kid for potentially a year, or do you want to take that money and divide it over 2 or 3 transfers? Those are things coaches look at every year in all these sports when they're trying to assemble their roster.
I don't think you want to get a reputation as all portal and nothing else. I mean, with quarterbacks too, right? Would you not pretty quickly get a reputation that we're just going to go get one out of the portal every single year? And that message would be sent to high school quarterbacks in these upcoming classes. Like, you got to kind of walk the line on both sides of it and dabble in both to keep kind of everybody satisfied.
Got plenty more questions left. First, let's get a word from our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions.
Hey, Sterling, man, come on. We got a roof to replace.
Let's go, baby. It's game time. Let's go. Hey, Sterling, you ready to go to the top? Man, I can't believe you guys been doing this for 25 years. Oh, baby!
Now this is what I call a rooftop party.
We have 25 years experience in roofing and exterior renovations, and we're backed by the best.
Are you ready to get your rooftop party started? Give us a call, 865-524-5888.
Local and trusted since 1999, 865-524-5888 to get a free estimate by calling Exterior Home Solutions. Hey guys, I want to tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a whole lot of fun. It was fun this football season. It can be fun this college and NBA basketball season as well. You can win up to 100 times your money this basketball season. Just select 2 or more players, pick more than or less than the projected stats, and then place your entry. It's really that simple. At least 2, no more than 6. They're going to give you a stat. You're going to click more than or less than. It's as simple as that. And it's a part of the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Easiest, most exciting way to play DFS. This is with PrizePicks. It's just you against the numbers, right? More than or less than. It's not battling thousands of other players, including many pros and sharks. You pick more or less than 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. Plus, right now, incredible offer. You play $5 in lineups, get $50 instantly if you put in that promo code VQ. Play $5 in lineup, get $50 instantly. Put in that promo code VQ, all that and more at PrizePicks.com. Promo code VQ. All right, let's jump back into the questions. How is Jake Merklinger progressing? Speaking of Jake Merklinger, amid Nico and GMac, we easily forget about him. like he will be the number 2 in 2025, being a snap away from becoming the starter.
I mean, will he be the number 2 in 2025? I mean, I think most people think that just because he's been here for a year, but I mean, I think that's an open competition for he and George to have. Either way, this is a much deeper quarterback room. I think Jake's continued to progress just fine, and you want to see that. I mean, he has to look at the situation like the poster just described it. He's one play away from being the guy, and so you approach every day like you are the starter. Otherwise, you get caught off guard if you have to be the starter.
It's a good question here from Pine. Everyone wants both, but if you had to pick between the two types of coaches, who are you picking? Great at coaching, but okay at recruiting. Great at recruiting, but okay at coaching.
Well, listen. You got to develop. You got to develop players, so you got to be able to coach. There's no question about that. But it's a lot easier to develop great talent than it is marginal talent. So you got to be able to recruit. Now the question becomes, if there's ever parameters and regulations put on the NIL world, and everybody's on more of an even playing field in recruiting, then you better be able to recruit. You better have a great recruiting staff. I think you're selling yourself short in terms of roster assembly if you think we're just going to buy everybody. Okay? I also think you're selling yourself short if you think we're just going to out-talent everybody from day one and we don't have to develop because we can just go to the portal and get a fix at every position. So I don't know I don't think that's an either or question, Austin. I know that's avoiding what he's asking, but I really don't think it's one versus the other. I think you better be able to do both. And you better have a blend of guys who can do both, right? You better have good recruiters on your staff. You better have good developers on your staff. You have to have both of those things if you're going to be successful.
Agreed. I think you do have to have a nice blend. You have to be able to do both. I would still lean more towards I want a better recruiter than a better coach, but you still have to be able to coach. I mean, like, it's not as simple as, just roll the ball out and talent just takes over. They still got to be able to understand what's going on and be able to read things and do all the little things, off the field that helps them on the field from being able to be very football savvy and have a high football IQ. So I mean, like, I agree. I still would lean more better recruiter than better coach, but I do think you got to be able to do both.
So I lean better recruiter than coach if you're evaluating and getting the right pieces in the recruiting. It's not just straight up talent. I think Arkansas basketball is the cautionary tale of you can have the most expensive roster in the sport, but if the pieces don't fit together, it's not going to work.
But we can look at this a number of different ways. I mean, look at the prior regime, right? And then look at the regime that came in 2021. You won 3 games the year before. You won 7, almost 8 games the next year, and then, of course, 2022 took off. And, I mean, I know there's recruiters on the staff. I'm not saying there's not, but you got some guys that can come in here and coach some ball. I know there was different factors in there, but I think you look at those 2 seasons back-to-back, and you can see, like, you better have some coaches on this roster for sure and how big of a difference that can make. But you got to have both at the end of the day.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, you take a guy who's marginal talent, okay, who's on the, nobody, the other big boys in the SEC didn't want him. You go get him with the idea that you're just going to develop him and coach him up more than anybody else is going to coach him up. Are you going to be better than the talent that you're playing from those big teams? I would say no. That's why you got to have both. You've got to go get the high-end athletic talent, and then you have to get them better. The teams that do that win big. I mean, I think, look at Georgia through the years, particularly defensively, where Georgia's been. They've gone and recruited really good players, right, AP? I mean, they've beaten out a lot of quality teams for really good athletes. Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, Carter, all these guys that are playing for the Eagles right now. I'm going to play for a Super Bowl. They were all really talented guys coming out of high school, but they all got better while they were there too. So you want to start with more talent than your opponent has, and then you want to be able to develop that talent better than your opponent develops that talent. That's why it's got to be a blend of both, in my opinion.
Nashville 615, where would you rank the football roster in the SEC? Top 5, top 10, top 15, 16?
I don't know, because I don't examine every roster. Like, I mean, I saw that question last night when you said the questions out, and I'm also like, I don't examine every roster to kind of know, like, I mean, like before last season, you would have said South Carolina's is kind of okay. They got a few cool pieces, but then like Lenore Sellers ends up being really, really good, right? So I mean, like that changes how you look at their roster. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you can. I mean, I think it's competent enough to make the college football playoff, which means it's got to be up towards the top, right? So I mean, that's kind of where I'd go with it. I don't know. Is it 3? Is it 5? Is it 7? It's in the top half of the conference.
In the Monday night chat, when asked about tampering, Hubs responded, "Can't enforce it." Do you think the schools coaches wanted to stop it? They could pressure the NCAA. Seems like the NCAA being hamstrung from even enforcing the easy stuff by schools who are benefiting from the Wild Wild West.
I mean, again, show me, lay out a plan on how you enforce it. How you tell an agent he can't talk to, a collective, or can't, there can't be some third party conversations going on somewhere along the way that says, hey, even if it's a player at a school talking to a teammate of his that he knew from 3 years ago, it says, hey, here's a number. Here's a number to call here, or have your agent call this person here. I mean, that's how you going to police all of that. It's the same way you couldn't police who was coaching on the field in practice and who wasn't coaching on the field in practice.
I mean, perfect example is like, kid picks up the phone, calls the agent. I'm thinking about getting out of here. See if there's any interest. Well, the agent talks to 15 different collectives during the course of the day, just because, they got other things going on with the collectives from other players and stuff. And they're like, well, Bobby over here at school X, he might be interested in leaving. Would your school have interest? And then trickle down from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way you're going to police tampering, Grant, is if player X has text messages from Coach X at other school, before they go in the portal. And
how are those becoming public? How's somebody finding those? How's the NCAA finding those?
Yeah, that's just not happening. I mean, it's just like contacting kids during dead periods. Back in recruiting days, right? You couldn't make, what was the term? Impermissible phone calls. Okay, that's why everybody's got 4 cell phones. I mean, it's just like, it's just a way of life. I mean, it's been this way forever. I mean, these guys are always one step ahead. It's just the way it is.
College athletics. You give us a rule, we'll find a way around it.
Absolutely.
To quote Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, life finds a way.
Playing in the gray area.
Volmanninetyeight, over under 7.5 Vols drafted this year. That just screams the under, right? I think 7.5 is a really big number.
Under.
I thought that was a baseball question, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm taking the under.
Now, I mean, there could be 7 guys that are in camps, but drafted under. Where does Tennessee stand with in-state kids? Caden Harris, Zach Groves, Justin Hopkins, and Craig Tutt.
Harris was supposed to come last weekend, did not come. We'll kind of see where things go there. I think Tennessee's a pretty good spot with a guy like Craig Tutt. Let's see here. Justin Hopkins, Tennessee's recruiting him fairly hard. Definitely in play there. And then who's the other one? First one, I think.
Groves, usually Groves.
Groves. Tennessee's in play there. So they're going to play with all those kids. We'll see, how quickly they can get some of those kids back to campus. But Tutt was here several times for games in the fall. Groves has been over. Caden Harris, same thing. So, to me, it's about getting these kids back when things open back up in the month of March.
Sam Smith, 22-33, weekend rotation of Doyle, Snead, and Kuhns. Do they split them up righty, lefty, righty, or do they make Doyle Mr. Friday night? It's a good question, and we'll see if Snead is in the quote-unquote weekend rotation to begin the season. I just think that makes the most sense right now because you know who you got in Snead. You know what he can do. He's a piggyback guy, can be a back into the bullpen guy. Just because he starts Saturday night, weekend 1, doesn't mean that's where he's going to be all year long. But with so much uncertainty with some of these young guys and the junior college arms, as you need to continue to bring them along, I could just see Nate Snead starting, first weekend or two. And then kind of going from there. If he does, and say that is Kuhns, one of those freshmen, and Liam Doyle. Doyle's the only one you know of for sure, but he doesn't scream Friday night to me. He's put on some velo. Don't get me wrong, but I would honestly have Snead go Friday night to begin things off, but if you don't have long-term plans with him being in the rotation, then maybe not. I would split him up to answer your question. But again, I think you need to be thinking a couple weeks ahead and not just in the present.
As we learned last year, Friday night means nothing.
No, as Frank Anderson said, that is not how you draw it up. Usually, that is not how it works out. But yeah, you can win a title with an opener on Friday nights. That is true.
That described my social life growing up. Friday means nothing.
That is not how you draw it up.
I expected the question to be, who's going to start Friday night, give us one inning, and then we turn it over to somebody.
Or 7 pitches. Who's the 7-pitch guy?
And it was always I'm going to pull him early that way he can come back later in the weekend, and it never happened. Never happened. And your baseball opinion: who's the starting first base in Week 1 when SEC Week 1 when Florida comes to town? I mean, I'll go Dalton Bargo until proven otherwise. I think Levi Clark will play there as well. I think Bargo can obviously move around. I think he can be the DH. I think it's going to be a heavy share of Bargo and Levi Clark, and then we'll just, whoever's kind of got the hot hand. But I think there's a number of different guys, as I mentioned on the board the other day. Hunter High's getting a lot of run there here in the winter so far. I think Manny Marin's going to get a look there. Chris Newstrom's a guy. Stone Lawless can play there when he's not catching. Just a lot to be answered. Let's go to Marvel. What, in your opinion, is Coach Barnes' frustrations with Dubar? Coach gets very animated when Dubar's in the game, to say the least.
That's a great question. I mean, Darlington had not been playing very well the last couple weeks at least, I guess, since that Texas game when he played so well in the second half there and helped Tennessee win that game. I think Darlington has a certain amount of – I think Rick gets in the heads of some of these guys when he starts getting on them. I think Darlington doesn't really get affected by it all that much. I think that kind of presses some buttons sometimes. And I think that's a good thing, honestly, to have a little bit of a pushback. I think what he did against Kentucky helps going forward because you need him. You need that extra body in the rotation. And I think Barnes likes Darlington Dubar and what he can give them. He just wants a little bit better execution and better play on the floor. Andrew
wants us to go around the room here and tell us our favorite candy. Brent, what's your favorite candy?
I'm a candy guy, man. Gummy bears, Sour Patch Kids, Starburst. There we go.
Gummy bears with vodka.
Yikes.
No, I don't soak my gummy bears.
In mulberry squeezins.
No mulberry squeezins.
What color Starburst, Hubs?
Cherry. Cherry's a Starburst. So that's probably the candy that's a problem. Is like if there's a bag of Starburst, I'm eating way too many Starburst.
What say you, Grant?
Probing information, by the way.
Sour Patch Kids is a good one. I'm not a huge candy person myself. Any combination of chocolate and caramel, chocolate and peanut butter, Reese's, stuff like that. I don't know, but I don't indulge very much in the candy world.
Says the man who goes to the gym at 4:30 every morning.
Well, that's so I can eat candy when I want to eat candy.
But he doesn't eat candy hardly at all. So, AP,
Reese Cup.
Any of the seasonal holiday Reese's, I agree. The goat is the egg because that's the one that started it all. But the trees, the pumpkins, the hearts, they're all great. Twix would also be option 2.
The problem with changing the Reese's is you need to, in my opinion, the Reese's cup is perfect in its own right. It doesn't need any alterations.
Well, the egg is better.
Fresh peanut butter.
The double stuffed Oreo ruined the regular stuffed Oreo.
Oh, I agree with that. If you're a regular Oreo guy, not a double stuff, you're dead to me.
You need help. Seek help.
What about the Oreo Thins? Are you guys into Oreo Thins?
No, seek double help.
Not shocked that you would be for that.
No, I'm just asking. Now, if we're going to go candy bar, there's 2 candy bars that we'll go from here. One, the fact that Hershey's got rid of the bar none candy bar 15 years ago and never replaced it is a crime. It's really sad.
You didn't keep them in business.
And I tried. Trust me, I tried. And then secondly, the Snickers with almonds, I grew up with them called Mars bars. I don't know why we had to rebrand those to a Snicker with almond, but that's the secret. That's the Snickers that sets the standard as opposed to a regular Snickers, the almond instead of the peanut.
I'll tell you what, most overrated candy bar. Go for it.
Well, I don't like coconut, so I'm not an Almond Joy or in that world.
I mean, probably just the Snickers or Butterfinger or something like that. Probably Snickers. That's the most popular candy bar, right?
I would go Milky Way. Craig Price is a big Milky Way guy. Milky Way, no.
I feel like Milky Way is just the Halloween candy. It just ends up in
Yeah.
Halloween bags every year. And that's the only time you see it. Then it disappears for the rest of the year.
While we're talking about candy bars that none of us have seen in 10 years, where are we at on Crunch?
Gross. Get
Crunch
out of
is
here.
good, man.
Crunch is gross. Twix are gross. Butterfinger's gross. Get out of here with all that.
Well, hold on. You just said Twix is gross, yet you said any combination of chocolate and caramel you're a fan of.
Yeah, but it's still not that combination. Except
but
the
not
Twix,
that one.
okay? Put the asterisk in there. Except
Okay.
for Twix.
Okay.
I love the fact that Kane is just looking for answers, and when he doesn't get them, he gets mad.
He's got the interrogation light on us.
He said, he
gotta
said
have mercy on
any
your
combination.
They got to have mercy on your soul, guys.
All right. Let's go to the Gator Dog, fittingly. I know we need to win on the road against Florida and Alabama, but dropping one we shouldn't has been just as daunting. Which is more likely to happen? Road win or winning the ones we should, or both?
Wait, what?
I read this last night.
I think he's meaning which is more likely to happen. Tennessee beats Florida at Florida and wins that type of game versus Tennessee dropping one on the road that they shouldn't drop to somebody.
Well, the only you go drop one to what, Kentucky or Mississippi State. I mean, I think more likely Tennessee doesn't win the games in Florida. Like, I think Tennessee's winning in Starkville, and I think Tennessee's winning in Lexington. So,
After the 30-point basketball loss in Gainesville a few weeks ago, I started working on a theory. I can't remember if I mentioned this on this pod or somewhere else, that Tennessee has been cursed in the city of Gainesville since they painted checkerboard end zones in '94 at the Gator Bowl at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. So I'm going to go the other way just to support that theory, because it's after 2023, it's back to kind of, you need to see it to believe it for a win in Gainesville.
I think the win in Florida is going to be so much more tougher than a win at Alabama. I mean, Alabama's going to be a fine football team, don't get me wrong, but it's not a difficult place to play, in my opinion. Florida certainly is. Florida definitely is.
Well, and you've given the game away every means possible in Florida. You've lost that game every way you could possibly lose the game at Florida.
At Florida,
it's a new way this year, but they've lost the game seemingly every way possible.
But
at Florida, it's a mental hurdle, and at Alabama, it's a talent hurdle.
But you know what, though? All that's great. Let me tell you the X factor this year. Mike Keith has never lost a game at the Swamp.
But he's never called a game at the Swamp. Yeah.
But he still never lost one. So you can't you can't counter that, Hubs, with your negativity.
When was the last time Tennessee played in Gainesville in November?
November, they haven't. They've never played in November. I don't think they played in December twice, because you had the you had the 01 game with 9/11. But even in 2020, that game was here in December.
I've got it
down there.
in my notes somewhere.
One of my buddies went down a rabbit hole looking for speaking of what the last time something happened, that vertical bar face mask we were talking about with what's his name the other day. He went back, and I think the one he found was Heath Schuler teammate, like early 90s. Like, it's been that long.
Jeez. That is incredible. I cannot wait to see that. We got two more. Let's roll through them here. UT champions. Brent, will there ever be renovations of the south end zone upper deck? Thought it was in the plans prior to Danny White's arrival, but what's the status of that?
I think from a cost standpoint, I mean, you would have to do so much structural work. I mean, that I just don't know. It would dwarf the cost of the $300 million you've done to the lower part of the south end zone, because in the lower part that they're just finishing up, you had space. You just had to knock stuff out and kind of clean it up that way. You don't have a lot of space up there. So how do you create space? Well, you have to add on. And I just don't see that's going to be the case. I think you got to look at what are you doing on the east side to kind of complete the lower bowl. How do you fix that? How much do you want to spend on that before you think about getting into anything with an upper deck? I just don't know that the upper decks, how feasible that is structurally to suddenly make that a 30-foot wide concourse or something like that. Now, let me say this, and I answered this in a thread because it was asked about earlier in the week. I've not been up there since Clarkston Hines caught 14 passes for Steve Spurrier in 90 and 88, and Duke beat Tennessee or whatever year that was, 89, whatever. I mean, I've not been up there in 35 years. So I don't even know what that looks like from a concourse up there. But I just structurally, I'm not sure how feasible that is.
Last one's going to go to Shellray 14. Why does Tennessee not take advantage of running backs in the passing game? The few times we have, it has worked. Grant, I think it's just something the staff doesn't like to do, but I think a lot of the times they keep the running backs in there to block. They got 6 or 7 man protections. You got to block somebody first before you can give yourself a chance to throw it to the running backs.
It's the $1 million question. I feel like we've been asked that question a billion times. I wish they would do it more. I agree with people when they do ask that you could take advantage of some of the athletes you have there, but for whatever reason, if we haven't seen it to this point with some of the guys they've had, I don't know if you're ever going to see it.
Yeah, I watch every game in the NFL playoffs and a lot of regular season games, and they throw to the running back. There's nothing wrong with throwing to the running back on a dump, a check down, a swing pass. So it's just not something this offense likes to do. So we'll see if that can change moving forward. But again, you got to be able to do 5-man protection and not 6 or 7-man protections and give yourself a chance. A lot going on over Volquest.com right now. Tennessee basketball trying to rebound against Florida at home this weekend. Tons of recruiting notes, a couple of junior days happened the last couple of weekends. Baseball season's coming up. No better place to join us than over at Volquest.com right now. Thank you so much for joining us here on this podcast, sending in your questions, and a big thanks to our friends Exterior Home Solutions for being the presenting sponsor of the show, 865-524-5888, or online at exteriorhomesolutions.com, local and trusted since 1999. For Brent Hubbs, Grant Ramey, Austin Price, I'm Eric Kane. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Thursday morning Volquest Mailbag Podcast.